It's your Friday Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer on the 7th day of August, 2026. Coming up later in the program, we'll learn how Iowa's first in the nation with a new federal workforce Pell Grant, new state rules for the biggest power line build-out in Iowa history, medical malpractice shakeup at the Iowa Supreme Court, and what it actually takes to bring the Iowa State Fair to life. That begins next week. And Tony Daner grooves us into the weekend. But first, what's at stake in the Farm Bill fight? Yesterday, the Senate Agriculture Committee failed to advance this year's Farm Bill, voting it down 10-11 along party lines. The sticking point was food aid. Democrats rejected the Republican plan for how much states would have to pay toward SNAP. And with two Republicans absent, the votes just weren't there. Chairman John Boozman put the committee into recess rather than adjourning, and he signaled he'll try again when the Senate returns in September. Our U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley on the committee was blunt about it afterward.
I've been on the Agriculture Committee since way back 1992. During that time, I've participated in 7 different 5-year farm bills. All of them were very bipartisan. It's a shame that Democrats will not join us in the bill this year. Iowans at my county meetings want a new farm bill. They want E15 year-round, and they want a fix to Proposition 12. Farm country is counting on us, and Congress obviously needs to respond and needs to act.
Democrats on the committee see it differently than the Republicans. Their objection is with the bill's food assistance provisions, specifically how much the cost of SNAP would shift onto states. Republicans offered to delay those requirements by a year. Democrats pushed for a difference. The Congressional Budget Office puts it roughly $19 billion. Now, the bill is stuck, and buried inside it is something with a much longer reach into farm country, nearly $2 billion cuts into a conservation program that tens of thousands of farmers depend on. Money, many of them were already promised. Emma George-Griffin covers agriculture for Harvest Public Media and has spent time reporting on what those cuts would mean. I spoke with her earlier today. Emma, welcome to our program.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Tell us about the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and why do farmers describe it as essential rather than just something that's nice to have?
Yeah, so it's a program that gives producers funding to do conservation projects on their farms and ranches, like no-till or planting cover crops or buffer strips. It's been around for nearly 30 years. And, those practices, while they are eco-friendly and really great for the environment, they have major benefits, for farmers. They can improve their soil health and, the water quality and their yields, and they can help, prevent erosion and protect them from droughts and wildfires and all that good stuff. So there's just, so many benefits to doing these practices, but they're just really costly. And with input costs being as high as they are right now, they don't really have any extra money to put towards planting cover crops, once they've bought their fertilizer and their fuel and all of their essential things. So this program, although it doesn't, fully fund those things, it gives them that extra boost they need to get it done.
Mm-hmm. More than 50,000 farmers could lose funding. They were already promised. What does already promised mean here? These are people, farmers in mid-project, is what you're saying.
For this year, they've got their funding. They're doing what they need to do, but starting next year, they could lose that. Like you said, over 50,000 farmers have applied for coming assistance in coming years, and because the Farm Bill cuts about $2 billion from the EQIP program, there's a gap there. There's a lot of farmers who likely won't get the funding that they were approved for and promised. Tens of thousands of farmers, are granted that funding every year, but there's tons more that have actually applied for this program and are on wait lists and would like that funding. So there's just a really high demand for this program. So not only are farmers likely not going to get the funding they were promised, there's a very long line of farmers who also want and need this funding to do the conservation projects and the regenerative agriculture, on their farms.
Yeah, more than 50,000 farmers could lose funding nationwide. Do you have a sense of how exposed Iowa and the Midwest producers are specifically compared to that national picture?
Yeah, so for Iowa specifically, around 1,500 farmers could lose funding. And that would be roughly about $46 million. And all that's according to an analysis from the University of Illinois. And for states like Michigan, it's roughly the same numbers, around 1,500 farmers ranging from $30 to $50 million at stake there. States like California, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, there's hundreds of $millions on the line for those states as well.
Yeah. What are you hearing, Emma, directly from farmers about all of this, the cuts, and now this delay?
Yeah, so one farmer I spoke to here in Michigan, he loves the program. He attributes a lot of his farm's success in recent years to the program. His sugar beet yields have more than doubled since implementing these regenerative practices. And he said a lot of farmers in his area can't afford to continue these practices without this funding. So they're going to have to kind of sacrifice those things that, could make them extra money, could help them break even at the end of the season.
Emma, Congress hasn't passed a full farm bill since 2018, really a long gap already costing farm country. What else are you watching as we keep following this bill between now and September?
Well, I think a lot of folks who are interested in the EQIP program are hopeful that this, month or so gap gives lawmakers time to, talk and negotiate and, maybe come back to committee with, some sort of compromise on this funding. I think growers, I think lawmakers, I think a lot of folks just want to get a farm bill passed, and it would be. So I think farmers are kind of hopeful that this month or so gap, will create opportunities for lawmakers to maybe come to some sort of compromise and negotiations on this EQIP funding. Bottom line, though, I think a lot of farmers and Americans would just like a farm bill to be passed at this juncture with such a long gap in between legislation.
Mm-hmm. Emma, George-Griffin covers agriculture for Harvest Public Media. Thanks so much, Emma.
Thank you.
It's your Friday News Buzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Iowa is the first state in the country to get a federally approved program under the new Workforce Pell Grant. That program is an EMT training course at Iowa Central Community College. The expanded aid, part of last year's federal budget law, lets low-income students use grant money for short-term career training instead of a full degree. IPR's Isabella Liu was in Fort Dodge this week as state and federal officials rolled it out. I spoke with her yesterday. Hi, Isabella.
Hi, Ben.
So let's talk about what's new here. Start broadly speaking. What is a Workforce Pell Grant? How is it different from the Pell Grants most of us have heard of?
Right. So the Workforce Pell Grant program is an expanded version of the traditional Pell Grant program. And that program is basically free money that's available to undergrad students who are in financial need. And this program was included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed last year, but this part specifically didn't take effect until last month. But Workforce Pell is different than normal Pell Grants because it's geared toward short-term job training programs like you mentioned. Specifically, it's for high-skill jobs that help address workforce needs, for example, in healthcare or in the trades.
Well, walk us through Tuesday's event. This was an event in Fort Dodge where we had state and federal officials. Who was there, and what was their pitch on this?
So Governor Reynolds and U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon visited Iowa Central, along with Acting Secretary of Labor Keith Sonderling. And McMahon and Reynolds pitched this program as a more nimble way to respond to workforce needs while also giving people more educational options. Specifically, they say it would help people get job-ready skills faster without taking on debt. Reynolds also said the program could help address the state's worker recruitment and retention problems. For example, she said that it could help fill EMT shortages in the state by making training more affordable for people. And they also pointed out, like you mentioned earlier, that one of Iowa Central's training courses was the first federally approved program for this grant.
Mm-hmm. What kinds of other programs actually qualify for this money?
Yeah, so qualifying programs have to correspond to jobs that are designated as H3 by the state. That's high demand, high skill, and high wage. This includes jobs in things like the trades, manufacturing, healthcare, and also IT. But these courses also have to meet very specific program requirements. They have to be between 8 and 15 weeks long and have to fall within a certain window of instructional hours. Plus, on top of that, they need to meet criteria like a high completion rate and job placement rate, and they have to be approved by the state and get final approval from the U.S. Department of Education.
So, Isabella, how many Iowa programs now have gotten the green light so far? What's standing between them and the students actually being able to use these new funds?
Yeah, so the state has approved 9 programs so far from 4 community colleges. These include EMT courses, truck driving classes, and programs for maintenance technicians. But so far, only one course has received that federal approval, and that would be that Iowa Central EMT course. The rest of the courses are still waiting on that final green light from the U.S. Department of Education.
Mm-hmm. Let's say, Isabella, there's some listeners out there thinking about a career change, maybe an EMT program or something else. What's the actual timeline for when they could use this money?
Yeah. Like the traditional Pell Grant, interested students need to fill out the federal student aid form known as the FAFSA, and that opens October 1st. And I spoke with an employee from the State Department of Education on Tuesday, and she told me this fall would be the earliest students could see money come through, but that would be for qualifying students that are enrolled in federally approved programs. She said it's more likely that this program will start being used in spring 2027. And for people thinking about a career change, these funds are also available to people who already have bachelor's degrees too, which that's different than the normal Pell Grant.
Isabella, what are you watching for next as more programs go through this approval pipeline?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how many workforce programs in Iowa meet this list of criteria. NPR reported last month that community colleges across the country are finding that lots of their programs are too short or too long for these requirements. And some schools are adjusting their course format to meet these thresholds. And I'm just curious to see whether programs in Iowa follow suit as well.
All right, IPR's Isabella Liu. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ben.
And this Friday, August 7th, Newsbuzz continues after a short break. It's River to River from IPR News. It's your Friday Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Well, as Iowa braces for one of the largest transmission build-outs in state history, the Iowa Utilities Commission has adopted new ground rules for how those lines get built. Those rules cover everything from noise levels to whether a company can plant support wires in cropland without asking the farmer. Cami Coons covers agriculture and the environment for Iowa Capital Dispatch, and she's been tracking the new standards. I spoke with her earlier today. Cami, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's start broadly. What problem were the regulators actually trying to solve with these new rules?
Yeah, Iowa Utility Commission said that they were trying to fix some safety and technical issues just ahead of these new transmission projects because they are a higher voltage transmission. Just knowing that they were a big transmission project, they wanted to kind of get ahead, I think, and put these rules in place, especially for cropland where they go through. So as you mentioned, this is going to require transmission owners to get permission from landowners on crop and pasture land to make sure that if they're going to put a structure that has guide wires on it, so those wires that come off of the tower to help kind of like stabilize it, not the transmission wires, obviously, they have to have those on there. But they have to have like explicit permission from a landowner in those situations in order to put those structures on because they're a little bit harder to kind of farm around.
Right, farm around, and you can see this if we're not farmers, we see them from the highways or the interstates here. These huge guy wires that hold up these structures here, kind of block off. I don't know. I have to really look next time. I pay more attention. Kind of block off, and you have to imagine a planter or a combine trying to move around those things, or you just, as a farmer, say, "I can't go there." Right.
Yeah, and I think that's Iowa Farm Bureau Federation was supportive of this measure and making it a thing where hey, if farmers have no problem around it and they don't feel like their livestock, if they're grazing cattle around it, they don't feel like
Hmm.
they are bothered by these guy wires, then they can say, sure, you can build this structure here. But basically, the builders have to ask that permission and get that permission from the landowner first.
There's some other changes here: noise, electric field strength. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so they also set a maximum for the noise standard. So that's measured over like a period of an hour, I believe. And so it has to fit within this 55 decibel rule, which is about the sound of like a household refrigerator running.
Hmm.
So Farm Bureau also said that they feel like this doesn't quite go far enough to
Hmm.
get at kind of the nuisance of these structures in rural life, but also that it's kind of a standard that's kind of a standard noise setting for it. And also with the field electric field strength limit is at 6,000 volts, which again is kind of like a technical thing, but Farm Bureau said that they believe that could still impact the behavior and productivity of cows and pigs that are nearby. So livestock can sometimes be more sensitive to those electric fields, is kind of what they're saying.
Hmm. Zoom out a little bit, because this is part of a massive regional transmission plan that goes by the name of Tranche 2.1. What is that, and how much of Iowa's farmland could realistically be affected by this build out?
Yeah, Iowa Utilities Commission said that there are going to be about 700 miles of this higher voltage transmission line built in Iowa. The MISO Tranche 2.1, which you mentioned, which MISO is like our regional grid operator, um, are planning this higher transmission line through the whole region. Basically, they're calling it a backbone of higher transmission so that basically we can meet higher electrical needs. More transmission you have running through a big line, then you can branch that off into other lines.
Hmm. Tell us a little bit about the reaction. You mentioned the Iowa Farm Bureau, the Iowa Utilities Commission. What is being heard from stakeholders here?
Well, other than Farm Bureau and Iowa Utilities Commission, MISO said that, they respect state and federal laws that are put in place around transmission projects. So that was kind of their response to this letter that Iowa Utilities Commission sent to them, asking, not necessarily asking, but just informing them of, hey, we have these new rules here as you are approving projects that will go through this Tranche 2.1 project. Please make sure that they are, aware of these considerations, and we'll play nice
Mhm.
with them.
Okay, these rules only apply to petitions filed starting in 2027. What happens between now and then? And give us a sense of what Iowa landowners in the potential project's path could be doing right now before any of it reaches their property.
Yeah, I believe that timeline lines up with the Tranche 2.1 projects, and why that date was set. So, I mean, landowners now can just be aware that they have that protection, if you want to call it that. That if someone is going to come through and build a transmission line and is seeking that they know that they have to have their permission for guide wires, especially.
Hmm. Let's dive over for the last minute, Cami, to West Nile virus. The Iowa Department of Health and Human Services has identified the first case of West Nile in the state so far. What else can you tell us?
Yes, first case of West Nile virus was detected in Iowa earlier this week. Last year, there were 57 cases of West Nile virus, according to the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services. Basically, this is just kind of a thing that has been happening in Iowa since the early 2000s. And really, the best thing to do is to avoid getting bitten by a mosquito. So, wearing mosquito repellent, wearing long sleeved clothes and socks and shoes when you go outside. And there are some severe health impacts that can come from getting bitten by a mosquito with West Nile virus, but for the most part, people might experience like a mild headache or a mild fever. It's not as common to experience some of the more severe symptoms.
Okay, so beware. Make sure you put on that whatever you need to keep those mosquitoes away. because the West Nile virus is a leading cause of mosquito-borne disease in the United States and transmitted by mosquitoes. All right, Cami Coons. She covers agriculture and the environment for Iowa Capital Dispatch. Thanks for the chat today, Cami. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Thanks.
It's your Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. The Iowa Supreme Court closed out its term with a docket that, well, on the surface, looked quieter than recent years. Fewer of the blockbuster gun rights and police conduct cases that we've had in recent years. But underneath that, the court spent much of the year cleaning up medical malpractice law and deciding the fate of dozens of pending lawsuits in the process. Des Moines Register Courts reporter William Morris has been tracking it all. I spoke with him yesterday. William, welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me back.
So let's start broadly speaking. What's the headline from this Supreme Court term, would you say? And why did medical malpractice end up dominating it?
Well, the court ruled on over 100 cases this year, as they usually do. And of those, 8 of them were, I believe, related to medical malpractice, so a smaller share, but one of the largest of any single type of law. And the reason that this kept coming up dates back a couple of years. So for some context, Iowa has a law requiring that if you file a medical malpractice case, you need to file what's called a certificate of merit, which is a qualified physician or a medical expert saying that your case has merit. This has been on the books for nearly a decade. There are other states that have similar laws, so it's pretty well established. But in 2024, the Supreme Court, and I should say that it has to be an affidavit, which means either you swear it in front of a notary or you swear it under oath. But in 2024, the Supreme Court had 2 rulings that kind of upset the apple cart a little bit when they ruled that the certificate of merit to be properly sworn has to either be sworn in front of a notary or has to include the specific language, that this is sworn under penalty of perjury. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Which is not how a lot of practitioners, either plaintiff side or defense side, had been treating this. And in fact, there were sample forms that you could get from legal publishers to use for these certificates of merit that did not have that language. But anyway, the Supreme Court ruled on this in 2024, which raised the question, what happens with all of the pending cases, some of which have been in the works for years now, where they did not use that correct language? And so they had a couple, that was in the 2024 term. In the 2025 term, they had a few more cases sort of following up on that. And then this year, 2025, 2026, they had just a bunch more cases of litigants that were caught up in various stages of the process, trying to hash out, are these cases still viable or not?
I wonder if there's a common thread in which these malpractice plaintiffs ended up winning versus losing this term. What could you decipher there?
Yes. So broadly speaking, it seems like for plaintiffs and plaintiffs' attorneys, when these decisions came in 2024, there were 2 strategies. Some plaintiffs tried to file an amended new certificate of merit with the correct language, just add that to their existing case. The problem there is that the law says you have a 60-day deadline after you file your complaint to do that. The other solution is that some people simply dismiss their cases entirely and tried to file a new lawsuit. The problem there is that in many cases you were past the 2-year statute of limitation from whenever the original medical injury happened. And so there were multiple cases sort of in both bucket that came to the court this term. And what the Supreme Court said is that, no, you can't just add a new certificate of merit after the deadline is passed. If it's the same lawsuit and you missed your 60-day deadline, you missed your 60-day deadline. So several of those cases were definitively dismissed. On the other hand, for the plaintiffs who did try to dismiss their lawsuits and refile, Iowa has a law that in some cases lets you count a new lawsuit as relating back to a previous lawsuit on the same topic. And the Supreme Court said, yes, that applies. So for the plaintiffs who dismissed their case and refiled, those cases can continue.
Okay, you said, as is normal, over 100 cases dealt with by the Iowa Supreme Court. Aside from medical malpractice, William, what else stood out for you from this term? I see gun rights, police accountability cases there.
Right. So Iowa passed a constitutional amendment in 2022, changing how the courts are supposed to address laws restricting the right to bear arms. There were a number of very contentious cases in the 2024-2025 term in which the court split on how to address this. This term, it was not quite as contentious, but there were still several cases where the court either upheld existing gun regulations or in one case said that the regulation restricting ownership by people convicted of domestic violence might be overbroad, and the legislature might need to modify it by, for example, possibly giving people convicted of domestic violence conviction some legal path to request for their rights to be restored.
With Iowa's newer constitutional right to bear arms showing up in these rulings, can you see where that doctrine seems to be headed?
Well, the constitutional amendment said that any gun restriction has to be considered under strict scrutiny, which is the most stringent lens that a court can use to address whether a law is constitutional. There's also U.S. Supreme Court precedent saying you have to consider whether a law, fits the history and tradition of gun restrictions going back to the era of the founding fathers. So far, most of the laws that have been challenged have been upheld, in some cases over some very heated dissent. But as I said, there are some cases where the courts are finding that some restrictions are, maybe viable as to some cases, but overbroad when applied to everyone, or other cases where the law does seem to need to be modified in light of these new precedents and this new amendment.
Cases involving police accountability also in this term of the Iowa Supreme Court. What can you tell us about those?
Well, there was several on the docket. In one case that involved a police officer pursuing a motorcyclist who wound up crashing and dying of his injuries. The court upheld a $4.25 million jury verdict against the officer. There was another case, a Waterloo police fatal shooting in 2021, where the lower court had dismissed the case and the Iowa Supreme Court revived it, finding that the law that the district court had applied didn't apply in this case. There was a third case where the court deadlocked. It was 3-3 with one justice sitting out. And in that case, a lower court's order dismissing a case against a Scott County deputy stayed dismissed. One other kind of interesting case, and this involved a murder conviction from the 1980s, where the defendant was filing a post-conviction relief claim, arguing that there was incorrect evidence and other problems that led to a wrongful conviction. And a big focus in that case was the viability of firearm ballistics testing. You might see this on CSI, where you fire multiple bullets and compare the casings to say, did these come from the same gun? And there's been a lot of scientific attention to this in recent years, people questioning whether this is actually as reliable as police and practitioners claim it is. There was actually several big studies that were done at Iowa State University, the Ames studies examining this. So this is, I think, one of the first times that there's been really a full-throated attack on the reliability of this evidence before the Iowa Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, we've looked at these studies, we believe that this evidence is viable, and that in any case, we think there was other evidence supporting this conviction from the 1980s.
As we finish up here, as we've been looking back at the recently closed term of the Iowa Supreme Court, let's briefly look forward. What are you watching for, William, when the new term opens in September?
I'm just curious to see what the focus is going to be. My first few years on the job, it seemed like every year we had a blockbuster abortion case, and then it was gun rights. This term, just sort of because of a quirk of the schedule, it was medical malpractice. What's it going to be next term? I don't know, but I'm certainly interested to find out.
We're sure glad you're there covering it, and thank you for this conversation. William Morris is the courts reporter for the Des Moines Register. Thank you, William.
You're very welcome.
In just a moment, we'll be back with this Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Stay tuned. It's your Friday Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. The Iowa State Fair opens in just over a week, but for the people who run it, it's a fair that never really stops. We have grandstand acts that are already being booked a year and a half out. Vendor lots start filling up. Well, months ago, they started filling up. Haley Peck is a journalist who got a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to bring the fair to life. I spoke with her yesterday. Haley, welcome to the program. You are the lead Des Moines bureau chief of the Quad City Times.
Hi.
Start with sort of a broad look. As I referenced there in those few words, most of us think of the fair as just a few days, an 11-day event. What does a year-round actually look like when you poke your head behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's all day, every day, all year. I can say I was guilty as charged as one of those people that also thought it was just an 11-day event until I dug in. But the Iowa State Fair alone has 80 full-time employees that they have on staff year-round, that their entire job is just to plan the fair for the next year.
80 employees. Give us a sense of some of the hats those people wear year-round. What are they doing?
They're booking grandstands. They're looking for the next best carnival ride. They're trying to see who they're inviting back for food vendors, beverage vendors. And then, sometimes they also have a little bit of other things that go on at the fairgrounds that they are responsible for outside of just the main event. But yeah, they start shopping around for their grandstand performers over a year and a half in advance, like you mentioned. Over half of 2027 is already booked. They're looking to see, how can we get something new and exciting, but also not change the fair so that it's completely different every year.
Yeah, and that's really the tightrope walk that I wanted to ask you about. And I'm surprised that they already have, for next year's fair, already half of it booked. Mm-hmm. That really shows you something. So talk about this. Fairgoers want tradition, but they want something new each year. How do you walk that line? How do they walk that line? What did you find out?
Yeah, I think they kind of walk the line by they have their staples that come back every year, but then they kind of try to find, just a few things, maybe not a lot, not overwhelming, that they kind of switch it up. So I know this year they're bringing back a roller coaster. There's a mobile roller coaster that they'll have at the fair this year that they haven't had the past couple of years. I know they said that they did have it a couple years ago, but it's kind of going to be reintroduced. So that's going to be a little exciting for your thrill goers. But then, you have your classics. Everybody loves to go to the fair, get a corn dog, get a funnel cake, maybe ride the carousel. These are things that everybody loves that you're just going to see returning year after year.
And what's interesting about the Iowa State Fair is the fairway. You mentioned a couple of rides, but the Iowa State Fair doesn't just sort of outsource this to, you may go to your county fair and it may be an outsourced fairway with the rides coming in. Not so at the Iowa State Fair?
No, they work with, I believe they said over 18 different vendors. They hand pick every single ride and every single game. So where a lot of fairs will typically work with like one contract company that will just bring in the rides and the games, they don't really go in and individually select. The Iowa State Fair is a little unique in that they pick every single ride and game. And they're one of the few fairs that actually do that in the U.S.
Right. And they, of course, have to work within the constraints of, I don't know how many acres they have available to plunk rides down, but I'm sure they have all kinds of diagrams
Mhm.
well in advance to say, well, the roller coaster's going to take up quite a bit of space, so we have to go here with that, and this has to move over here, and so forth here. Um, with more than 500 vendors this year, Haley, uh, how does a fair decide who gets in and who doesn't?
So the way that the Iowa State Fair does it is they have, especially their food vendors and their beverage vendors, if you have participated in a fair previously and you're in good standing, they do invite you to come back the next year. So about 90% of the vendors you see are return vendors. But for the other 10%, they get to just apply, and then it goes to the vendor committee. A collection of your 80 full-time employees that go and they look at every single one and they try to balance, well, we don't want to have seven of the same sort of vendors, but we want something that people are going to like, but we also, want to introduce a few new things. So they try really hard to find that sweet spot of this is new and exciting, but it's also not, it's a little more one of a kind rather than I'm going to see the same thing every 5 steps sort of ordeal.
Yeah, and as a journalist, you know that what makes at least sort of lighter headlines during the fair time is what kind of crazy food is on offer, usually with a stick holding it up, right?
Yeah.
So they're well
Yes.
aware that that's a draw, and that creates a news buzz.
hmm And it creates excitement, with the people that are going to the fair.
Um, how often have you been to the fair, Haley?
This will actually be my first Iowa State Fair.
Oh, right. What are your expectations from what you've heard?
I think I'm going to be completely blown away. I'm expecting that. I grew up going to the Great Jones County Fair. And so I have an idea of what an Iowa Fair looks like, but I have a feeling that I'm going to walk into this one and it's going to be bigger than I imagined.
And so much every year, and we don't quite know. Perhaps we'll get a look at the weather here, what the fair weather outlook has in store for us. But it can be anything from rain to heat, dry, and of course we have the soapbox as part of this, and that's a big part in any election year too. So, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so well, I can tell you that that's where I will be stationed for most of the fair. But the Des Moines Register hosts the political soapbox every year at the fair. They invited 26 candidates who are supposed to be on the ballot in November, and as of right now, 21 of them have accepted from both sides. And so they each get 20 minutes to talk, go on their quote unquote soapbox, and they can elect whether they want to have audience participation or not. It's completely up to them. So I don't know. I don't fully know what to expect because I've never witnessed one, but I'm sure it'll be exciting.
On the non-political side of competition, we
Mhm.
have, what am I reading? 40,000 competition entries. That's a staggering number. These are entries for livestock, but all kinds of other things, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got your 4-H kids that obviously compete, but then you can submit a pie, you could submit a loaf of bread, quilts. There's a dollhouse building and decorating competition, which I have never heard of before. That, almost 100 people have entered to compete in. So it really sounds like there is a competition for everyone, whether you know that it's there or not.
A personal favorite of mine, my wife and I witnessed. We loved the llamas were dressed in different costumes, and they had a parade. I hope they have that again this year. The llamas. Uh,
I hope so.
have you talked since this is your first year, Haley? Uh,
Mhm.
a trial by fire, so to speak. Uh, have you talked with anyone about giving you tips about do's and don'ts? I suppose pace yourself would be one thing.
Not a ton. I do have a couple of friends who have been the past couple of years, so I know they're ready to show me the ropes. Other than that, I don't know, I think just like any other fair, make sure you drink enough water and wear sunscreen. Um, I know I will be writing a column about my experience, and I get to try some of the different foods and come back and report back on maybe what's good and what's a little questionable.
Well, Haley Peck, good luck enjoying this year's fair and surviving it. I guess that's a word I could use here too. Haley is the lead Des Moines bureau chief with the Quad City Times. Look for her at the fair, as she said, hanging around the soapbox. It looks like maybe prior to the fair, you want to get in touch with her at the Quad City Times and send her some tips of your own if you're a longtime fair goer. Would you be open to that, Haley?
I would happily be open to that.
Haley, good luck. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Bye now.
Thank you.
Coming to the end of your Newsbuzz edition of River to River from IPR News, I'm Ben Kiefer for this August the 7th, 2026. Time enough to groove into the weekend with my friend Tony Daner, IPR Studio One host. Hey there, Tony.
Hey there, Ben.
Before you groove us into the weekend, are you up for some This Week in Odd History trivia?
Of course I am. Let's go.
All right, and let's do it, please, in honor of Alex Trebek, in the form of Jeopardy. So if you can remember, your correct response would be in the form of a question. Who is fill in the blank? Okay? Let's
Got
see
it.
if we can do that. Okay. This week in odd history, on August 4th in 1693, this Benedictine monk was mythologized as inventing this bubbly wine, even though he actually spent years trying to stop it from fermenting a second time, since winemakers at the time saw the bubbles as a dangerous flaw that could blow up the barrels.
Who is Saint Champagne? I don't know.
Who is, and I've never had it because it's too darn expensive for me, who is Dom Perignon?
God, okay, all right. I wasn't specific enough.
That was a tough one. I give it to you.
Okay.
That was a tough one. Let's see if you do
Appreciate
better
it.
on this one. This is a more recognizable name. On August 5th, 1926, this escape artist spent 21 minutes sealed inside an airtight metal coffin submerged in a Manhattan hotel pool just to prove a rival illusionist's claim of supernatural underwater survival was really just controlled breathing.
Who was Harry Houdini?
Ding, 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 ding. You got it.
I was second guessing myself. I couldn't remember if it was Harry or Henry. I had a moment.
Oh, yeah, Harry Houdini. And the question
Okay,
for
great.
you to tag on there, 91 minutes in a sealed underwater coffin. You have the choice between that or being a monk in charge of wine that keeps exploding. Which would you mind?
I'm going to go with the first one. That sounds a little more
You want to be
fun.
in an underwater coffin for 91
Oh,
minutes?
geez. No. Heck no. I was thinking of the first question. No, I'd much rather be in
I
charge
got
of
it.
exploding wine. That there's some stories there at least.
I did reverse the order. A little tricky of me. Tony,
That's fine.
groove us into the weekend.
Yes, here's something I know about. All right, so two great new songs to check out this week, Ben. This first one is from a band called Balin. This is a family band, two twin brothers, Daniel and David, and their younger sister, Julia. It was originally going to be just the two brothers. They've been at this for a while now, but they wanted three-part harmony, so they said, well, let's get Julia in here too. Now she's the lead singer and the guitar player. They're getting ready to put out album number 3 later this year, and I was a big fan of their first record, Ben. I kind of missed the second one, and then I found out they're on a new label, so maybe something happened there. But they're kind of well known for not only their harmonies, but their big choruses. And this song's got that. They say it's about breaking away from systems, this is a quote, and relationships that make you believe you can't survive without them. This is Balin and their new song, Swim.
But am I happy if I have to ask? So burn that bridge. Say, honey, I know how to swim. Yeah, I'm lucky I know how to live without you. I've done it before. Burn that bridge. I don't have another second to give. Yeah, I'm lucky I know how to live
The New York City-based indie pop and folk rock trio made up of three siblings, as Tony told us. Balin, the name, also their last name, with Swim. Tony, we have time for one more.
Okay, so this is a new favorite artist of mine, also been at it for a while. He goes by the name Medium Build. Nicholas Carpenter is his legal name, originally from Alaska. I saw Medium Build perform live earlier this year. First of all, some of the most hilarious in-between song stage banter I've ever heard. I was just belly laughing the whole time. And then he'll very casually start playing and total mood whiplash, some of the most emotionally devastating songs I've ever heard. So seeing Medium Build live is quite a journey. Also with a new record coming in September. This one's called King of Having Fun. Ben, I was recently told September is in less than a month. Did you know this? I'm really struggling with that.
It does go by fast.
Yeah. The song we're about to hear kind of reminds me of the experience of being out in public and making up stories about strangers you see out and about. And this song also explores themes of masculinity, male depression, and other topics like that. And it's set in a Home Depot, which is also the name of the song, Home Depot from Medium Build.
Holding up a corner of the barn, and he says, can't call it drunk driving if you're not driving very far. Ain't no one checking on. He lost $100 betting with his buddies on the game. He's always taking credit, but he ain't ever taking blame. Hey Steve, been building walls since she was 17. Hey Steve, ever watching movies on repeat. Hey Steve, it's how you pretend to keep it cool in a world so mean.
Nick Carpenter with a new one called Home Depot. He goes by the name Medium Build, and we'll go out with that, Tony. Thanks for grooving us into the weekend.
Thank you, Ben.
Hey, if you want to broaden your musical horizons, you feel you're just listening to the same old set of songs from high school or college, well, we know that's a problem. IPR Studio One is there for you every day, 24/7. Get your daily soundtrack of the best in new music and old favorites. You can stream online at studio1.org. Download the IPR Studio One app, or in Des Moines, listen at 94.1 FM. The best in new music and old favorites. Tony, you have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Ben. You too.
Today's program, produced by Caitlin Troutman. I'm Ben Kiefer. Thanks for joining us.
So mean, cool in a world so mean. He's at the Home Depot buying all the stuff to build a house. His heart's the only project he ain't got the tools to figure out.